My name is Devin Hayes. I'm 23, and last month, I sued my own parents. Yeah, I know how that sounds. People hear that and think I'm some spoiled kid trying to throw a tantrum in court. But if you're willing to listen, really listen, I'll tell you what pushed me there, what broke me enough to stop being their son and start being someone who fights back. Because I didn't do this out of hate. I did it out of love. For the one person in this world who ever made me feel like I mattered, my grandmother. You see, I grew up in Castle Rock, Colorado, a quiet town with red brick houses, pine trees, and picture-perfect families, at least on the outside. Inside our house, though, it felt like I was always speaking through glass. My dad, Richard Hayes, is a numbers man, literally. He's a real estate investor. He can calculate a mortgage faster than he can say, "I love you." Not that he ever did. He believes people should be useful or invisible, especially the elderly. My mom, Cynthia, is the kind of woman who irons her curtains. Blonde curls always perfect, red nails gleaming, voice sugary and sharp. She manages a cosmetic surgery clinic downtown, and to her, life is a performance and appearances are everything. Then there's Kyle, my older brother. He's the star. MBA from Arizona State. Startup in Austin. Articles online praising his visionary leadership. My parents act like he walks on water. They don't see the debt, the failing company, the desperation behind his smile. They just see his suits, his photos with investors, and think that's what success looks like. Avery, my younger sister, is 19. She's a sophomore in Denver and a mini celebrity on social media. She posts our happy family all the time. But funny thing, I'm almost never in the pictures. One time I asked her why. She laughed and said, "Oh, Devin, you're always off doing law school things. It's your aesthetic, mysterious and unavailable." But I wasn't unavailable. I was just not included, and I used to be okay with that. Used to think if I just kept my head down, did well in school, maybe one day they'd finally see me. But the only one who ever truly saw me was Grandma, Lorraine Hayes. She lives alone in Fort Collins, about an hour and a half north of where I study law at the University of Colorado in Boulder. Her house is small, kind of worn down, with chipped window frames and a front garden full of lavender and daisies. She's almost 80 now, but still trims the bushes herself. Hands wrinkled, movements slow but proud. She smells like chamomile and cinnamon. Always wears soft sweaters. She remembers every birthday, every dream I've ever had. She was the one who told me stories of my grandfather, a lawyer who believed the law wasn't just about winning, but about protecting people. When she said, "Devin, your heart is enough," I believed her. When she said, "Law is for the people who can't fight for themselves," I felt like she handed me a sword. So yeah, I might have grown up in a family that ignored me, but I never felt invisible at her house. Not until that weekend. It was a Friday afternoon, a week before finals. I was neck-deep in constitutional law readings when I got the text from her. "Devin, are you free this weekend? I made a birthday cake and want you to try it." I stared at it. Her birthday. Her 79th. I had completely forgotten. Guilt punched me in the chest. I checked my calendar, no exams, no pressing deadlines. Just an empty weekend and no more excuses. "I'll be there. Grandma, wait for me," I replied. I didn't know then. That visit would change everything. I spent that night building her a small wooden picture frame. Inside, I put a photo I took last summer her in the garden, watering can in hand, sunlight catching her silver hair. It was one of the few times she looked truly happy since Grandpa passed. I left Boulder the next morning. The road to Fort Collins stretched long and golden dry grass and pine forests flashing by as I drove in silence. The air was crisp, but my stomach was tight with nerves I couldn't explain. I parked outside her house just after 2 p.m. Something felt off. No smoke from the chimney, no music playing, no scent of tea or baked apples like usual. Still, I told myself she was probably just napping. I climbed the porch, knocked once, then pushed open the old wooden door. "Grandma, I'm here," I called out. Silence, then the faintest sound of movement from the kitchen. I stepped inside. The same floral armchair, the wedding photo on the wall, and at the table there she was, sitting alone in front of a small, white cake with strawberries on top. She wore the blue sweater I gave her last year. Her hair was tied back neatly, but her eyes were lost. She looked up slowly, blinked. "Devin," she said softly, as if waking from a dream. "You're here. I made this cake." Then she paused, looked down at the cake, looked back at me. "Why did I make it? Is it someone's birthday?" My heart cracked. "It's your birthday, Grandma," I said gently, sitting beside her. "You made it for yourself, and I came to eat it with you." She smiled faintly, confused. "Oh, right. My birthday." I glanced around. No decorations, no balloons, no flowers. 2 plates, 2 forks, nothing more. She asked, "Where are your parents?" "Your brother Avery." I swallowed hard. "They're probably busy." I lied. We ate in silence. The cake was delicious, but it might as well have been sand in my mouth. When we finished, I stood to clear the table. That's when she said it. "Devin, have you seen your grandfather? He said he'd be home for my birthday." My hands froze on the plates. He'd been gone 4 years. I turned away, blinked fast. "He went to the market," I said. "He'll be back soon." She nodded, satisfied, and hummed softly. I stepped onto the porch, pulled out my phone, and called my dad. "Devin." His voice was flat, distant, like I was interrupting something. "It's Grandma's birthday," I said. "Why isn't anyone here?" A pause. Then he said casually, "Oh, we're in Aspen. Kyle wanted a ski weekend. Your mom and Avery came too. The snow's great." I felt like someone kicked me in the chest. "None skiing." I repeated. "You knew it was her birthday. You left her alone." Dad sounded annoyed now. "Don't make this dramatic. Devin, it's just a birthday. Your mom sent her money. You're there. She's fine." I hung up before I could scream. I looked through the window at my grandmother, still sitting quietly, her fingers tracing the edge of the plate. Alone. Abandoned. She wasn't fine, and something inside me snapped. I didn't know yet what they had done behind my back. Didn't know the papers they'd made her sign. Didn't know about the couple already on their way. But I knew one thing. This right here was the moment I stopped being their son and became my grandmother's only defense. The morning after her birthday. I woke up early. Grandma was already in the garden, sitting on her old wooden chair, blanket across her lap. watching birds flutter in and out of the lavender bushes. The sun lit up the edge of her silver hair like a halo. "Morning, sweetheart," she said with a warm smile, though I could tell she wasn't fully awake. Not just physically, but mentally too. There was a haze behind her eyes. I brought her tea. Chamomile and mint, her favorite. As she sipped, I stood beside her and took it all in this little garden. The chipped flower pots, the faint smell of soil and aging wood. This was her world. And soon, I would learn someone had sold it out from under her. I didn't know that yet. I thought maybe this trip would just be a quiet pause from Boulder. A chance to remind her she's not forgotten, that she still matters. That morning, I dusted bookshelves and wiped down the kitchen counter. The house was old, sure, but still had a soul. The kind you only find in homes where people have actually lived and loved. Grandpa's coat still hung by the door. His walking stick leaned quietly in the corner, untouched. The wedding photo of him and Grandma smiled at me from the living room wall. That's when I noticed something odd. A drawer in the living room desk, slightly open. Inside, a brown envelope, sealed only halfway. It wasn't Grandma's style to leave documents out in the open like that. I hesitated, then pulled it out. Bank statements, utility bills, and then tucked between them a note. Meet the buyer, Tuesday, 10:00 m. The handwriting wasn't Grandma's. It was sharp, tight. My dad's. My stomach clenched. Buyer. Buyer for what? I tried to breathe. Maybe it's just another one of Dad's properties, I told myself. Maybe he used Grandma's desk when visiting. Maybe it's nothing. But even as I told myself that, I knew something wasn't right. That afternoon, Grandma and I had lunch together, grilled cheese and tomato soup. I tried to act normal. She complimented my cooking, even though the bread was burnt and the soup came from a can. But when I asked her about Dad, has he visited lately, she squinted and said, "Oh, maybe a few days ago, or was it last week, he came with some people. Suits. They asked me to sign some papers, bank things, I think." Her voice was casual, trusting, unworried. Mine wasn't. I asked, "Do you remember what they looked like? What kind of papers they were?" She shook her head, clearly frustrated with herself. "I'm sorry. Devin, I try to remember things, but sometimes it all feels like static." I squeezed her hand. "It's okay. Grandma, don't worry." But inside, I was already spiraling, because if what I feared was true, then this wasn't just neglect anymore. This was manipulation, and from the very people who were supposed to protect her. The next day, Sunday, I started cleaning more thoroughly. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe I just needed to do something. Around noon, someone knocked on the front door. A firm, deliberate knock. I dried my hands and walked to open it, expecting maybe a neighbor. Instead, I found a neatly dressed couple on the porch. The man was in a gray suit, leather briefcase in hand. The woman wore a beige cardigan and a polite, rehearsed smile. "Hello," the man said. "I'm Bob, and this is my wife, Susan. We're here for the final inspection." I blinked. "Inspection? For the property," he clarified. "We're the buyers. We signed the transfer with Mr. Richard Hayes last week. Just here to take one last look before a move-in." "Move-in?" My vision blurred. "This house isn't for sale," I said, my voice tight. They exchanged a look. Bob opened his briefcase, pulled out a document. and handed it to me. Signed by Mr. Richard Hayes and Mrs. Lorraine Hayes, he said. I scanned it. Title transfer, notarized, with Grandma's signature at the bottom. It was hers. That shaky, slightly tilted scrawl I'd seen on every birthday card. But she would never sell this house. Never. This isn't right, I said, holding the paper like it was a live wire. She doesn't remember signing anything like this. She's not in the condition to be agreeing to something like this. Susan stepped forward, trying to sound sympathetic. We're really sorry if there's confusion. Your father assured us everything was in order. He said your grandmother had agreed, and she signed in our presence. I felt heat rise to my face. You met her? Bob nodded. Yes. We came by with him. She seemed a little slow, but she signed willingly. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I need you to leave, I said, voice trembling. I need to speak with her. They hesitated, then nodded and stepped back. I closed the door, leaned against it, and stared at the floor. A numbness spread through me. This wasn't just a bad birthday. This wasn't just my family being cold. This was theft, betrayal. I walked into the kitchen where Grandma sat peeling an orange, humming softly to herself. Grandma, I said gently, kneeling beside her, do you remember signing anything recently? Something about this house? She looked confused. The house? Yes. She frowned. I think your father brought someone. They said it was just paperwork, bank things. I signed because he asked me to. I didn't read it. I just trusted him. She looked up at me, her eyes cloudy. Did I do something wrong? My throat tightened. No, Grandma, you didn't do anything wrong, but someone else did. That night, I barely slept. I sat on the porch with my laptop, the transfer deed beside me, the note still tucked in the envelope. The cold cut through my hoodie, but I didn't care. The world I thought I understood my family, my role in it, had shattered. They hadn't just forgotten her. They had used her, and worse. They'd done it in plain sight, with a smile, and if I didn't stop it now, she'd lose the only home she had left. The next morning, I woke up with a decision already made. I wasn't going back to Boulder. Not yet. Not when the only person who ever made me feel seen was about to be pushed out of her home like a piece of furniture no one wanted anymore. I called my civil procedure professor and told her I needed to take a few days off for family matters. She didn't press for details. Maybe she heard something in my voice, maybe not. But she approved it. The truth is, I didn't even know what I was staying for. I had no plan. I just knew I couldn't leave Grandma alone. The house looked the same, still smelled faintly of lavender and old books, but it felt different now. Like it was holding its breath. Like it knew something was coming. Each day, I tried to give Grandma a sense of normalcy. I brewed her tea in the morning, helped her in the garden, cleaned the porch. She smiled when I handed her a cup. Told me I was just like Grandpa, words that cut deeper now than ever. Because Grandpa would have never let this happen. But I was here now, and I would fight the way he would have. I noticed something else while I cleaned a little leather notebook tucked behind a stack of gardening magazines in the living room. Grandma's handwriting. Inside recipes, grocery lists, and little notes like remember Devin's birthday and ask Devin about law school. There were pages where her handwriting got shakier, slanted. Then, one entry that stopped me cold. Richard came today with men. Said I had to sign for the house. I don't remember why. I feel tired. I stared at it. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a pattern. It was proof. And now I had to act. I stepped outside onto the porch, held my phone in my palm like it was burning, and called Dad. He answered after a few rings. "Devin, what now?" His voice had that same clipped tone. No concern. No warmth. "I know about the sale," I said. "I saw the deed. I talked to the buyers. Grandma doesn't even remember signing it." A pause. Then, casually, everything was handled legally. She agreed. She wasn't lucid. I snapped. She has a cognitive condition. She thought Grandpa was still alive yesterday. That's not my fault. He said coldly, "You weren't here. Devin, you don't know how forgetful she's become. She's not just forgetful, Dad. She's vulnerable. You used that to make her sign something she didn't understand. Don't talk to me like that," he snapped. "You think I did this for fun? You think I wanted to sell her house? Then why did you?" I demanded. "Tell me the truth." Silence. And then, the twist I didn't see coming. "It's for Kyle," he said. Finally. His startup is going under. He needed a bailout. The house was the only real asset left. So yes, we sold it. For him. For our family. I couldn't speak. Kyle, the golden boy, the one who never heard no a day in his life. You chose him over Grandma, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You don't understand. Dad said, we were trying to protect everyone. No, you were trying to protect an image. A lie. He hung up. My hands were shaking. I called Mom next. No answer. Then I texted Avery. Did you know about Grandma's house being sold? She doesn't even know she signed it. No reply. I stared at her latest Instagram post, a photo of a brunch in Aspen. Caption family first. Nash grateful, sh blessed. The irony made me want to scream. I sat in the living room, beside Grandma, who was dozing off in her chair, blanket around her legs, the sun catching the edge of her face. I watched her for a long time, and I knew this wasn't just a betrayal. It was erasure. They didn't just take her house. They erased her presence, her history, her worth, and I wouldn't let them get away with it. I opened my laptop and typed out the first line of a legal draft. Notice of intent to challenge property transfer. Devin Hayes, on behalf of Lorraine Hayes. But I wasn't a lawyer yet. I needed help. I emailed Professor Margaret Stein, my ethics professor, known for being strict, fearless, and fair. Subject line: need help. Urgent. Elder abuse case. She replied within the hour. Devin, if your grandmother lacked mental capacity, the contract can be challenged. You'll need medical evidence, witnesses, anything proving she wasn't competent. If you can gather that we can build a case. The next morning, I took Grandma to her local clinic. Dr. Harris, an older woman with kind eyes, pulled up the records 6 months ago. We noted signs of early cognitive decline. She said, she forgets dates, mixes up people, repeats questions. I asked if she could provide a statement. She nodded. I exhaled just a little. Now I needed a witness. That evening, I walked next door and knocked on the weathered green door of Mrs. Helen, Grandma's neighbor. She opened slowly, Then her face softened. "Oh, Devin, I was hoping you'd come." I explained everything. Her face darkened. "I remember the day they came." She said, "Your father." Two people in suits. She looked so confused. She asked me later if it was about her bank account. "Would you be willing to give a statement?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "I'll do whatever I can." When I got back to the house, Grandma was sitting on the porch with the wedding photo in her lap. She looked up and smiled. "You're such a good boy, Devin," she said softly, "just like your grandfather." I sat beside her, looked out at the fading sunlight. The lavender bushes rustled gently in the breeze. That night, I wrote everything down in the leather notebook. My plan, my timeline, my evidence. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about justice. It was about finally stepping out of Kyle's shadow. It was about showing them I wasn't invisible, that I was enough, and I would fight not just for Grandma, but for the person she always believed I could be. I had less than 7 days to stop it. 7 days before the Millers came back, keys in hand, expecting to walk through the front door of a house that should have never been sold. Grandma's house, her garden, her memories, the smell of chamomile tea, the faded armchair where she told me stories about Grandpa, stories that made me want to study law in the first place. And now it was all hanging by a thread. I sat at the kitchen table that morning, my laptop open, scattered notes all around me, medical documents, timelines, quotes from state statutes. I hadn't slept much. My coffee was cold. The sun was barely up. Grandma hummed from the living room, rocking slowly in her chair, not knowing her home had been stolen while she slept. I glanced at the clock at 1:42 a.m. I had to move fast. First, formalize the case. I finished typing the draft complaint accusation of undue influence, lack of capacity, elder exploitation, and sent it to Professor Stein. She replied almost instantly. "You're building a strong foundation. Focus your argument on 2 points, her mental incompetency at the time of signing, and your father's direct manipulation. Keep gathering support. You'll need more than truth, you'll need proof." I knew she was right, so I took the risk. I called the Millers. Bob picked up. His voice was stiff. "Devin, Mr. Miller," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I'm preparing a legal challenge to the property transfer. I'm not accusing you directly, but I need to ask something important." A pause. Then, "Go ahead." Did my grandmother seem confused, disoriented when she signed? Another pause. I imagined him turning to Susan, covering the phone. "Finally," he said. She didn't seem sharp. She asked who we were twice. "Your father told us she had good days and bad days, and you still signed. We trusted him," Bob said, almost defensively. "He said he was managing her affairs, that everything was above board. Would you be willing to testify to what you saw?" Bob hesitated. "Then let me speak to Susan." He hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Susan, I'll testify," she said, her voice soft. We didn't know she was in that state. If we had, we never would have signed. That felt like oxygen. One more piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I looked down at the open notebook on the table, the one I'd found behind Grandma's gardening magazines. I'd started writing in it now. Every night, a page. It wasn't just a legal record anymore. It was a promise. Page after page, I wrote, she trusted him. They abandoned her on her birthday. They sold her legacy for Kyle's broken dream. That night, I sat beside her as she watched the sunset through the kitchen window. Her eyes were glassy, but calm. "Grandma," I said quietly, "I want to take you with me. Just for a few days. Somewhere safe." She looked at me, puzzled. "But this is my home." "I know," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. "And I'm going to make sure it stays that way. I promise. But just for now, I need to keep you close." She paused, then smiled faintly. "Okay, as long as I'm with you." The next morning, I packed a small bag for her some clothes, her favorite blanket, and the wedding photo. When I reached for it, she gently placed her hand on mine. "Don't lose that one," she whispered. "It's where I remember him best." I nodded. We left Fort Collins by noon. The sky was clear, the air crisp. She sat quietly in the passenger seat, staring at the Rockies in the distance, occasionally murmuring about the trees or pointing at hawks circling overhead. My apartment in Boulder was tiny. One bed, one window, one desk. But it was safe. I gave her the bed, slept on a folded blanket on the floor. The next morning, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting the lapel of my blazer. I took Grandpa's old tie pin, the one I found in Grandma's drawer, and clipped it onto my collar. It wasn't flashy, just a simple brass pin, shaped like a balance scale, but it felt like armor. That day, I marched to the Boulder County Clerk's office and filed the official motion to challenge the deed transfer. As I walked out, sunlight hit my face. The wind caught the hem of my coat. For the first time in years, I felt tall. Later that night, after Grandma fell asleep, I called Kyle. He answered on the second ring. "Devin," his voice was cautious. "I know everything," I said. He didn't respond. "You used Grandma's house to cover your business debt. You made Dad do it. And you all thought she wouldn't remember." "It's not like that," he said, his tone defensive. "I didn't force anyone, but you let it happen." He was silent. I pushed harder. "Do you know where she is right now on my floor, in my apartment? Because she has nowhere else. She has money. She has memories." "Kyle," I snapped. "She had a home, and you stole it." His voice rose. "You think I wanted this? You think I'm proud of it? I'm drowning here. Devin, investors are pulling out. Payroll's overdue. This was survival. At what cost?" Another silence. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Some of us don't have the luxury of being idealistic." I hung up. I sat on the floor, staring at the ceiling, my heart beating hard. Idealistic. If protecting the one person who ever loved me unconditionally makes me idealistic, then fine. I'll carry that like a badge. The next morning, I printed the letter I'd written to my parents. I didn't send it yet, but I folded it, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it into my legal binder. Inside it, I'd written, "I will not be silent just to keep this family image intact. I am not your puppet. I am not a spare part. I am your son, but I am also someone's grandson. And I will protect her even if I stand alone." The court date was set for 5 days later. That night, as I watched Grandma sleep under my thin blanket, I whispered quietly, "I'm going to win this for you." And for the first time, I believed it. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before dawn. Grandma was still asleep in the bed across the room, curled up beneath the floral quilt I'd brought from her house. Her breathing was soft and steady, peaceful. I sat on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the crack of light creeping beneath the window blinds. My suit hung on the back of my chair, ironed the night before. A little too big at the shoulders, but it would have to do. And inside the lapel, clipped just above the pocket, was Grandpa's old brass tie pin, the tiny scale of justice. I had worn it all week, not just as a symbol, as armor. That morning, I reviewed everything again. Testimonies, medical records, timeline, contracts, witness statements. The photos of Grandma's handwriting, steady from months ago, trembling when she unknowingly signed her home away. And tucked between those documents was the letter I'd written to my parents, still sealed. I didn't know yet if I'd give it to them, or if they'd even care. At 9:12 a.m., I helped Grandma into the car. She wore a light blue sweater, the same one from her birthday. Her fingers trembled as she buckled her seatbelt. But she looked calm. "You look so grown up," she said, smiling at me. "Your grandfather would be proud." I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just nodded. The courthouse in Fort Collins isn't grand. It's quiet. Brown brick, pale tile floors, and the smell of old paper and stale coffee. But that day, it felt like a battlefield. I recognized them instantly, Mom and Dad sitting on the other side of the courtroom. Dad in his tailored gray suit, arms crossed, mouth drawn tight. Mom in a burgundy blouse, hands clasped in her lap, eyes refusing to meet mine. They had a lawyer with them, a man in a sharp black suit, silver tie, and a voice that could charm snakes. Kyle wasn't there. Neither was Avery. Figures. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. She was middle-aged, sharp eyes, no nonsense air about her. She nodded once. "Let's proceed." I stood up, hands cold but steady. "Your Honor," I began, "I'm here today to request that the court declare the property transfer of my grandmother's home null and void. Mrs. Lorraine Hayes was not mentally competent to sign at the time of the transaction. I walked through the evidence like Professor Stein had taught me, one piece at a time. Clean, sharp, controlled. Medical reports from Dr. Harris. Statements from Mrs. Helen confirming confusion and signs of decline. Notes from Grandma's own journal. And finally, the buyers themselves. Susan Miller took the stand first. She sat down, folded her hands neatly, and looked the judge straight in the eye. Mrs. Hayes didn't seem fully aware. She said, "She asked who we were more than once. She looked at her son for direction before signing. My husband and I. We assumed he was acting in her best interest. But now, we know better." Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes did. Then it was my parents' turn. Their lawyer stood, confident. "Your Honor, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes acted only out of concern for Mrs. Lorraine Hayes. The property sale was necessary to secure long-term care and reduce financial stress on the family. The contract was legally notarized, signed in front of witnesses, and executed without coercion." He turned toward me. "The plaintiff is a first-year law student. He lacks experience and is emotionally compromised. This case stems from family drama, not legal malpractice." The words hit like punches, but I didn't flinch. When it was my turn again, I stood tie-pin gleaming under the court lights. "This isn't about emotions," I said clearly. "It's about power. My grandmother trusted her son, my father. And he exploited that trust when she was vulnerable. He didn't consult her. He didn't explain the consequences. He just took. I looked toward the judge. Then I turned toward Grandma. Her eyes met mine. She's the one who taught me to believe in the law. That justice isn't a theory. It's something real. Something we owe to the people who raised us, even when they forget our names. The judge nodded slowly, then called for the final testimony. Grandma. I stood beside her as she walked to the stand. Slowly, carefully, I held her elbow. She leaned on me just enough to feel present. The judge spoke gently. Mrs. Hayes, do you remember signing papers regarding your home? Grandma blinked. She looked down at her hands, then up again. I remember my son, Richard, coming over, she said, her voice faint but clear. He brought some people, told me to sign something. Did you know you were selling your house? She paused. I thought it was a bank thing, maybe something for insurance. I didn't know I was giving it away. Her voice cracked. This house is all I have. My husband and I built our life there. I never wanted to leave. The room went silent. Even Dad looked away. I helped her back to her seat. Then the judge announced a short recess before issuing her decision. I walked Grandma out to the hallway bench. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You did good, Devin, she whispered. My eyes burned, but I kept it together. Inside the courtroom, the tension was a storm. I saw Mom pacing, Dad talking with his lawyer, voice tight, movements sharp. When we were called back in, I braced myself. The judge looked at us, her expression firm. Based on the evidence, the testimony provided, and relevant statutes regarding undue influence and mental capacity, this court finds that Mrs. Lorraine Hayes was not in a competent state of mind at the time of signing. She paused. The transfer of property is declared null and void. I heard Susan Miller exhale behind me. Mrs. Helen sniffled softly. The judge continued. Furthermore, temporary guardianship of Mrs. Lorraine Hayes is granted to Mr. Devin Hayes until a long-term plan is determined. And just like that, we won. But there was no cheer, no hug, just silence. I looked across the courtroom. Dad stood up, walked out, didn't look back. Mom followed, her face stone. They left before I could say anything. The only sound left in the room was Grandma's whisper. You kept your promise. I helped her out of the building. The sun was low now, warm across the brick path. She held my arm as we walked to the car. As I opened the door for her, she turned and asked, Devin, where are we going? I smiled. We're going home, Grandma. And this time, she smiled back, no confusion, just warmth. But even as we drove back to Fort Collins, the road stretching ahead of us, I knew this wasn't the end. We had our home back, but the people I used to call family, they weren't done with me yet. The day after the verdict, the sky over Fort Collins looked cleaner. We pulled into the driveway just before sunset. The lavender bushes out front were swaying gently, catching the last golden rays. Grandma's eyes lit up when she saw the house, really saw it, and I felt something shift inside her, like a memory reconnecting. This is our home, isn't it? She whispered. It is, I said, smiling. And it still is. I helped her inside. The floors creaked the same way they always had. The familiar scent of mint tea and old pine wood lingered in the walls. The armchair sat waiting by the window. She sat down with a soft sigh and looked around as if she were inhaling history. And then she smiled, really smiled. For the first time in weeks, it wasn't strained. I brewed tea and placed the cup into her hands. "Mint chamomile," I said. "You remembered," she said, almost surprised. "I always do." I stepped outside to take a breath. That's when my phone buzzed. A new message from Kyle. "You'll regret this, Devin." 4 words, nothing else. No context, no apology, no acknowledgement. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding not with fear, but with something else, the realization that the story wasn't over. Not for them. Kyle might have lost the house, but he hadn't lost the delusion that he could still control the narrative. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my legal binder, removed the sealed envelope I'd been carrying for days, the letter I wrote to my parents. I thought about tossing it, but I couldn't. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and finally opened it. Reread every word. "I'm not angry because you hurt me. I'm angry because you threw her away for a lie. And I won't carry the silence anymore, just to protect the illusion of a perfect family." I signed it at the bottom, Devin Hayes' grandson first, son second. The next morning, I mailed it. To both of them. By noon, I received a call. Not from Dad. From an old friend, Mark, a guy I used to know in Castle Rock. I heard what happened. He said, "Your dad, he's not exactly keeping quiet about it." I leaned back in my chair. "Of course he isn't. He called you an ungrateful brat. Said you destroyed the family name." I sighed. "Figures. But here's the thing," Mark said, lowering his voice. "Some people agree with you, especially the older folks. My aunt said what you did was what decent people are supposed to do." That caught me off guard. I hung up feeling complicated. Outside, Grandma was watering the garden, humming to herself. The sun was warm. The air smelled like earth and lavender. And still, inside me, there was a storm. Because while I had won the case, I hadn't escaped the cost. Mom never called. Avery hadn't texted. Kyle was blaming me for everything. I checked his company's site. Still up, but barely. New investors had pulled out. His About Us page was gone. No updates on socials in days. And yet, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like I'd survived a fire, but still smelled like smoke. That afternoon, Grandma called me into the living room. "Devin," she said, her voice soft. "Do you remember that little trail behind the lake, near Grandpa's old fishing spot?" I asked. She nodded. "You used to run down that path when you were little. Barefoot. Wild." She looked at me. Her eyes were misty, but steady. "You're still running," she said. But now, toward something I didn't know how to answer. So I just sat beside her, and she reached over and placed something in my hand. It was Grandpa's tie pin. "I kept it all these years," she said, "because I knew one day someone would wear it, not just to look like a lawyer, but to fight like one." I clenched it in my palm, eyes burning. That night, I added a new entry in the notebook. "They think I tore the family apart. But the truth is, there was nothing holding it together. Not love, not loyalty, just performance. And I stopped performing." The next morning, a delivery truck pulled up. 2 men in gray uniforms dropped off 3 large boxes. labeled in permanent marker Hayes Family Storage. I opened the top 1 old photo albums, a few books, a broken vase Mom used to keep on the dining table, and on top, taped to the lid, was a note in my father's handwriting. If you want memories so bad, here, take them. No signature, no apology, just bitterness. I sat down beside the box and laughed, quiet, broken, bitter. I was no longer a part of their mythology, and that hurt more than I wanted to admit. But I looked across the room at Grandma, dozing peacefully in her chair, her cup still warm on the table next to her, and I knew I hadn't lost everything. I'd kept the one thing that mattered. Later that week, I visited the university. I walked into Professor Stein's office, handed her a folder. All records. I said, "Case closed. House safe." Grandma stabilized. Guardianship officially recognized. She smiled, warm and proud. "You've done what most people twice your age would never even try." I hesitated. "I'm thinking of deferring another semester." "Of course," she said. "Take your time." "But I'm not quitting," I added. She nodded. "Good. Because this world needs people like you." As I walked out, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was chasing someone else's definition of success. Not my parents. Not Kyle's. Not anyone's. Just mine. That evening, Grandma and I sat in the garden again, drinking tea. The sunset was slow and pink, burning across the Rockies. She turned to me, eyes half closed. "You're my home now, Devin," she said. I didn't speak. I just held her hand. We didn't need words anymore. Not here, not now. But as the sky dimmed, a new message buzzed on my phone. This one wasn't from Kyle. It was from a lawyer, an estate attorney from Austin. "Mr. Hayes, I represent one of your brother's former business partners. I'm reaching out because some irregularities have come to light. We believe your name may have been used on documents without your consent." I sat still, cold, staring at the screen. They didn't just sell out Grandma. They used me too. I stared at the email. "Read it again, then a third time. Your name may have been used on financial documents tied to a disputed investment fund. The amount exceeds $170,000. My breath caught in my chest. This wasn't over. Kyle hadn't just sold out Grandma. He'd dragged my name, my identity, into whatever scam he'd been running. And if my name was on those contracts, I wasn't just a victim. I was a liability. The estate attorney, Mr. Patel, had attached a PDF. My signature was at the bottom of 3 pages, except I never signed them. I'd never even seen them. I called him immediately. "Mr. Hayes," he said, calm but firm. "I understand this is upsetting, but we believe you may have grounds for civil litigation, possibly criminal fraud." I ran a hand through my hair. "So, what do I do?" He paused. "Do you want to pursue this quietly, or do you want this public?" I didn't answer right away, because deep down, I already knew. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about the pattern. My father stole from Grandma and framed it as duty. Kyle used me and called it opportunity. And my mother, she watched it all and called it family. That afternoon, I filed a formal affidavit denying all involvement in the fund Kyle had launched, Silver Rock Real Assets, LLC. I requested a forensic handwriting analysis, sent in old documents, notebooks, legal forms from school, every sample I could find to prove the signature was forged. 2 weeks passed. In that time, I made new tea with Grandma every evening. I helped her plant mint in the yard. I even taught her to FaceTime my cousin Lily in Oregon. She called it talking through the mirror. But I saw it, she was getting stronger. Meanwhile, online, the world Kyle built was falling apart. 2 ex-partners posted threads on LinkedIn and X exposing misleading investor pitches. One woman claimed Kyle had promised her 8% monthly returns and 0 risk. Another guy said Kyle had used fake testimonials to land a $50K investor from Boulder. His company's website went down. His glossy Instagram reels deleted. And then came the subpoena. Kyle was officially under investigation for wire fraud. That night, I sat on the porch with Grandma, watching fireflies flicker over the lawn. She held her teacup with both hands. "You fought for me," she said quietly. "But you also fought for you." I had to. I replied, "Because if I didn't, they'd win twice." She reached out and patted my knee. "I'm proud of you. Not because you won, but because you refused to lose your soul doing it." That hit me hard, because she was right. I didn't take revenge the way they would have. I didn't bury truth in silence. I didn't erase people. I just stood up, one quiet day after another, and said, "Enough." And people had heard. Emails started coming in. A woman from Denver said her son was being manipulated out of his share of their late father's ranch. A man in his 50s from Idaho wrote about his siblings forging their mom's will before she'd even passed. It was like my case had given them permission to speak. Even Professor Stein called again. "I'm planning a community law series," she said. "Workshops on elder rights and asset protection. Would you like to help?" I hesitated, then said, "Yes." And just like that, I wasn't just someone who fought for his grandma. I was someone helping others fight for theirs. I still keep Grandpa's tie pin in my coat. Still sip mint tea every night. And once a week, I write a letter I'll never send. To my dad. I don't do it for forgiveness or closure. I do it to remind myself who I am. That I come from something good, even if he chose to forget it. Last week, a package arrived. No return address. Inside one photo. Me and Grandma on her birthday, years ago. Before any of this. Taped to the back, in a handwriting I recognized too well, were 6 words. "You won, but you're still alone." No signature, but I knew it was him. My hand shook. I stared at the photo, feeling the weight of it. But I didn't cry. Instead, I took out a sticky note, the same kind Grandma used to leave on the fridge, and wrote, "Not alone, just finally free." I stuck it on the mirror in the hallway. Every morning, I pass it on my way out, and every morning, I read it like a quiet vow. So if you're listening right now, maybe your family did something unthinkable. Maybe they made you feel crazy for remembering it the way it really happened. Or maybe you're the only one left who cares about the truth. Let me tell you something. That makes you dangerous to the ones who lie, and precious to the ones who still believe in justice. If this story made your heart race, if it made you feel seen, don't scroll past. Like this video, leave a comment, and tell me what would you do if your family tried to erase you. Because this story isn't just mine. It's yours too.